All right, so today we're diving into a story that, honestly, just shouldn't have happened. I mean, think about it. You've got 13 colonies. They can't even agree on where their own borders are, and they're going to take on the biggest, baddest military and economic power on the planet? It sounds impossible, but this is the story of how an idea and a whole lot of grit forged an entire nation. So here's how we're going to walk through this. First, we'll look at the massive challenge of just getting these colonies on the same page. Then we'll get into the thick of it with the first brutal battles. After that, we'll see how the whole revolution nearly froze to death during one awful winter. And finally, we'll see how they pulled off a victory that, well, turned the whole world upside down. And really, this whole thing boils down to one giant question. How? Seriously, how did a bunch of disorganized colonies, a collection of farmers and merchants with no professional army and practically zero cash, manage to defeat the global superpower of the 18th century? It sounds like a fairy tale, but it's not. It's exactly what went down. Okay, so to find the answer, we've got to start somewhere you might not expect. Not on a battlefield, but in a meeting room. Because before a single coordinated shot was ever fired, there was this massive political hurdle they had to clear. Somehow getting 13 very different colonies to act like one. So picture this. It's the summer of 1775. We're in Philadelphia. Now, yeah, the first shots had already been fired at Lexington and Concord, but there was no United States. Not yet. You just had delegates from the 13 colonies, guys like George Washington, Ben Franklin, all crammed into a room trying to figure out, what on earth do we do now? I mean, the fate of an entire continent was literally hanging in the balance. And just think about the sheer weight of the questions on the table. This wasn't some casual political debate. No, they were literally inventing a country from scratch, in real time, all while staring down the barrel of the British Empire's gun. You had people in that room screaming for total independence, sitting right next to guys who were still praying for a peaceful fix. Any one of these issues could have just blown up their fragile unity right then and there. But, talking about this stuff in a room in Philadelphia is one thing. Putting it all into practice, that's a whole different ballgame. And those decisions were about to slam headfirst into the brutal, bloody reality of war. A perfect example? The Battle of Bunker Hill in June 1775. So you've got this colonial militia digging in on a hill that overlooks Boston. And then you see them, the British Army, the most disciplined fighting force in the world, just marching straight up the hill at them. The colonial commander gives that legendary order, don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes. Why? To save every last bit of ammunition. And man, it worked. They unleashed these devastating volleys that sent the redcoats reeling back. But in the end, they had to retreat. Why? For one simple, frustrating reason. They ran out of gunpowder. So yeah, they lost the hill, but in a weird way, they kind of won the day. Because that loss for the colonists came at a jaw-dropping cost for the British. We're talking over 1,000 of their professional soldiers killed or wounded. That number sent an absolute shockwave all the way back to London. The message was loud and clear. This was not going to be some small, easily crushed uprising. This was going to be a real war. And that whole episode just perfectly highlights the two monster problems facing this revolution. Problem number one, money. They were printing this new continental currency, but it wasn't backed by gold or silver. It wasn't backed by anything, really. So it was pretty much worthless. Problem number two, a real army. What they had was a temporary force made up of farmers. And look, you can't blame them. When it was time for the harvest, they wanted to go home. So the army's ranks were always thin. So the question is, how in the world do you fight a war like that? While those two huge problems, no money and no professional army, they were about to come to a head in the most brutal way possible. The winter of 1777. The place was called Valley Forge. And this would be the absolute rock bottom of the war, a moment that would either shatter the revolution into a million pieces or forge its army into something unbreakable. The conditions, they were just horrific. I mean, the army was literally starving. Soldiers didn't have uniforms, they didn't have shoes, they didn't even have enough blankets for the freezing cold. They had to build their own log cabins just to have some shelter. And then disease, it just ripped through the camp. It killed far more men than any battle ever had. Honestly, it's a miracle the entire army didn't just pack up and walk away. But right in the middle of all that despair, something amazing happened. Little sparks of hope started to appear. You had key people who just refused to let the cause die. Martha Washington was there, helping to organize relief for the soldiers. You had this young, energetic French nobleman, the Marquis de Lafayette, using his own money and his incredible optimism to keep the men going. And then, and this is so crucial, this Prussian officer, Baron von Steuben, shows up, and he starts relentlessly drilling these starving, ragged soldiers day in and day out, and slowly, incredibly, starts to transform them into a disciplined, professional fighting force. And that transformation, right there at Valley Forge, was the turning point of the entire war. The army that marched out of that winter camp in the spring was not the same army that had stumbled in, defeated and broken. This was a new army, an army that was finally ready to win, setting the stage for the final decisive chapter of the revolution. Okay, so the end game. It all goes down at Yorktown, Virginia in 1781. The British general Cornwallis, he makes a huge mistake. He parks his army on this little peninsula, thinking, hey, the powerful British Navy can just resupply me from the sea. But Washington sees his opening. It's the chance of a lifetime. He marches his army south, and at the same time, the French Navy, who are now America's most important ally, sails in and completely blocks the British escape by sea. Just like that, Cornwallis was trapped. He was completely surrounded. He had American and French forces on land and the French Navy blocking any escape by water. Cornwallis had absolutely no choice. He surrendered his entire army. And when he did, his message was short and to the point. Sir, the dance is over. And with that, for all practical purposes, the war was won. But hold on, winning a battle, even a huge one, doesn't automatically create a new country. For that, you need diplomacy. It actually took another 2 years of tough negotiations over in Paris to formally end the war, and, this is the really important part, to get Great Britain to officially recognize that the United States of America even existed. And wow, what a recognition it turned out to be. The Treaty of Paris wasn't just about ending the fighting. It was a stunning victory all on its own. Just take a look at this. Britain didn't just say, okay, you're independent. No, they also handed over all the land from the Atlantic coast all the way to the Mississippi River. With a single stroke of a pen, the size of the brand new United States literally doubled. So they did it. They had actually done the impossible. They won the war. They secured this huge new territory. But that victory created an even bigger, maybe even harder question, one that would hang over everything for the next decade. The fighting was over, but could a nation that was built on the very idea of revolution actually govern itself? Well, that was a whole other fight that was just getting started.